What is up, guys? Rick Cactus here, and today we are going to be showcasing the top 5 legendary scout rifles in Destiny 2 that would make fantastic Masterwork weapons. Now, Masterworks, only recently added into the game, provide a small randomized stat bonus as well as generate an orb of light that recharges your allies' supers as well as your own upon getting a multi-kill, which is a double kill or anything more. Now, it's upon that basis in which these weapons were selected. This is not necessarily the top 5 scout rifles in the game. These are the top 5 scout rifles for turning into Masterworks. And by that I mean their efficiency and their ability to get those multi-kills is highly considered. As well, PvE has a much more dominant factor in these weapons rating than PvP. However, PvP is still considered. And that's simply because it is so much easier to get multi-kills in PvE than it is in PvP. If you run a strike with a proper Masterwork kinetic or energy weapon, you're going to be generating 20 to 30 orbs in that strike, whereas your teammates who may not have a Masterwork are generating 2 to 6. And so, now that we understand how these rankings were selected, let's get started at rank number 5, and that is the Conspirator Legendary Leviathan Raid Scout Rifle. This weapon has a few things going for it. Number 1, it has the full auto trigger system perk. You hold the trigger and the gun does the work for you. And because of that, this is a great scout rifle for people who don't like scout rifles. If you much prefer auto rifles but want something that functions much better at longer ranges, the Conspirator is the perfect weapon for you. It's also a scout rifle because of full auto that can hip fire down enemies and function better at those closer and medium range engagements than most other scout rifles out there. So full auto trigger system is a very good perk in my opinion. If you really don't like it and you're very comfortable pulling the trigger yourself, you can always select Ambitious Assassin, which is the Leviathan Raid perk. This makes it so that if you get a multi-kill, which is pretty easy, with the initial magazine, you'll reload and have a bigger magazine, hence getting you more multi-kills. So you can just keep reloading and really gain the benefit of Ambitious Assassin. It also helps that this perk was recently buffed in a patch, so it's working more effectively now. This also has the perk Dragonfly. Precision kills create an elemental damage explosion. Not as good as D1's Firefly, but if you do get a headshot on a thrall, it will explode and damage and potentially kill nearby thralls. They do have to be pretty close nearby, but Dragonfly is certainly one of the better PvE perks out there. Not to mention that the Conspirator is actually pretty effective in PvP as well. Now, moving on from there, we have in the number 4 slot, the Pleiades Corrector Legendary Future War Cult Scout Rifle. This weapon was very hyped up when it first came out, but hasn't seen the performance that many expected. With that being said, it's still a very effective weapon. Firstly, it's in a great archetype, and with the 200 rounds per minute archetype. It also has some very good perks overall, high caliber rounds and flared magwell, either getting more stagger on opponents or improving your overall DPS, and this weapon reloads blindingly fast with flared magwell, but very importantly, its final perk is Rampage. Kills with this weapon temporarily grant increased damage stacks up to 3 times. Rampage. With a scout rifle that only requires a few shots to kill an enemy, you are getting the 3 times bonus very fast, especially if you do, in PvE especially, pair this weapon with flared magwell. You can very easily get the 3 times bonus, reload, and keep shooting an enemy while still maintaining that 3 times rampage damage bonus. So you are rampaging the majority of time you are using this weapon, and it does improve the shots on a multitude of enemies that you need to kill them. So if you're getting rampage times 3, you'll often require 1 less shot, especially 1 less headshot, in order to kill certain enemies. And that really does increase your efficiency and just lets you keep up rampage times 3 a lot more often. And of course, a weapon that gets a substantial damage bonus for getting quick, successive kills is fantastic with another ability that generates orbs for getting quick, successive kills. Rampage and Masterwork's orb generation work hand in hand to make this a very effective weapon. The Rampage perk and the Masterwork ability are meant for each other. But it is time to move on to our number 3 slot, and that goes to the Manannan SR4 Legendary Scout Rifle. This is a very effective, but quite frankly often forgotten little scout. This also has a 200 rounds per minute archetype, very good, but extremely importantly, it has the perk Explosive Payload. So that's right, this is an energy scout rifle with explosive rounds. That is extremely rare. And we need to take a little bit of time to talk about just how darn good Explosive Payload is as a perk. Because this is not the only time we are going to see this perk. So Explosive Payload is extremely effective in PvE because it spreads your initial damage around. Whereas with a normal weapon, shooting one enemy does a certain amount of damage, Explosive Payload will make that kind of same damage happen, but also damage any nearby enemies. Not only damage, but stun them. In fact, Explosive Payload is fantastic for flinching enemies in PvE and in PvP. Many people don't know this, but Explosive Payload is considered by many to be actually more effective than high caliber rounds, because Explosive Payload will flinch you more than normal when you get hit by it, and flinch you horizontally, which can be harder to recover from than the increased vertical flinch you get from high caliber rounds. Frankly, that could be its own video, but there you go with a little tip there. Explosive Payload is so good in PvE that its presence on pretty much any gun, like the Better Devil's Hand Cannon, will propel it to the top tier slot. And let's not forget to mention that a perk that makes you damage multiple enemies at the same time is pretty darn good for generating orbs on a multi-kill. So the Manannan has the benefit of one of the best perks in the game for a Masterwork weapon, and frankly a weapon in general, but again is also an energy weapon, meaning that you get this effectiveness while also being able to take down enemy shields a lot easier, and it's a very great handling weapon as well. The main downside here is the pretty abysmal range stat. The Manannan has a pretty poor starting range, and unfortunately the only thing that increases that is a long zoom optic, which most people just aren't going to want to run. But if you're running strikes in PvE, that range stat won't matter as much. And moving on from there, in the number 2 slot, we have the Nameless Midnight Vanguard Legendary Scout Rifle. I think a lot of you expected this to be number 1, but this weapon is still absolutely fantastic. I would never be disappointed for getting a Masterworks Nameless Midnight. Like we explained before, there's no need to go over it really again. Explosive Payload, that's the main thing we're looking at here. It's a fantastic perk. Also, steady rounds if you want this more usable, and flared magwell are also decent perks, and this does have the precision frame intrinsic perk. So this is going to be a very accurate weapon, and it also is in a different archetype than we've been seeing before, in the 180 rounds per minute archetype, meaning that it does more damage than the weapons we've seen before, and because of that, this is going to be more usable in the traditional scout rifle role at very long ranges. So if you want to stay back in a public event or in a strike or wherever in the raid and pick off enemies at longer ranges, the Nameless Midnight is going to be a fantastic choice, certainly more than the weapons we've seen up to this point. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually our first kinetic scout rifle we've looked at so far, and that's actually a positive. And that's because scout rifles are great in that kinetic slot. Yes, they aren't as effective against shields, so overall an energy may be kind of the better weapon, but having a scout in the kinetic slot is fantastic because there are so many good closer range energy weapons. Most of the fantastic auto rifles in this game, I'm thinking the Uriel's Gift, the Number, the new Positive Outlook, those are all energy weapons. And so being able to have an auto rifle that covers those closer medium range engagements and a scout rifle that covers the longer range engagements is going to be what a lot of people are looking to run, and the Nameless Midnight makes that a lot more possible. If you want to run a normal kinetic auto rifle, you're pretty much only looking at the Origin Story as a really top tier contender. And although the Nameless Midnight has been absolutely crushing in PvE for the longest time, it's also a very effective PvP weapon as well. You have very strong stats, and again, you have the benefit of explosive payload. So overall, fantastic weapon. Again, a lot of you probably expected this to be in the number 1 slot. But moving on, the number 1 slot does go to the brand new Purpose Trials of the Nine Legendary Scout Rifle. Now, I am expecting big things from this scout rifle. You're going to start to see this a lot more as people keep doing trials and start to get this weapon. Right now, it's still relatively rare, but again, you're going to see it more and more and more because it is such a fantastic weapon. It belongs to the 200 rounds per minute kind of Might and Multitool archetype. We've seen this before in the further rankings, and it's still fantastic here. The main thing is that this is basically a Manannan, but in the kinetic slot, so we've already explained that a kinetic scout is often the way to go for a lot of people's builds, and lacking the one downside the Manannan had, which was the abysmal range. The Purpose has a lot better starting range, and on top of that, it can further improve the range by simply selecting different ballistics instead of putting on a terrible long zoom sight. You get to keep the fantastic sight this weapon automatically comes with and increase the range by selecting, small bore or whatever ballistic you choose. So that is another huge benefit for this weapon. In addition to that, you have the highlight of explosive payload as a perk. Again, absolutely fantastic, works super well with this weapon. But then you have the Trials perk Slide Shot, which is actually pretty effective. Sliding is going to partially reload around 3 rounds into your magazine, which 3 rounds with a scout rifle is more than enough to kill a lot of the enemies within the game, and temporarily boost range and stability. So you can very easily, kill a few guys, get that multi-kill, produce an orb, slide again, reload part of your magazine, kill the next guy, or even kill one guy, slide, kill the next guy, slide. You can extend your magazine actually quite a bit with the Slide Shot perk. And if you don't like that, you can always have Hipfire Grip, which makes it a little bit better up close. But mainly, we have a great archetype for a kinetic scout rifle that has explosive payload. If you did like the Nameless Midnight, I would recommend trying this weapon out if you can get it, because I think a lot of people are going to prefer a Nameless Midnight essentially with a faster firing archetype. So it's better up close, it's better in those medium ranges, and it's better at just putting forth damage onto enemies, onto multiple enemies, and getting a crap ton of orbs from Masterwork's abilities. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, PvE is much more strongly considered, but PvP is still a factor. And I can say I've been using this weapon in PvP. It's a monster. Again, you're going to see this weapon more and more and more as more people get this, but seriously, this thing shreds in the Crucible, so if you are a PvP player, this is the top slot for you as well, I believe. And so guys, that is it for the video. I hope you enjoyed and found this informative. Now, if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. But if you actually want to get notified of new uploads, be sure to press the bell beside subscribe. Now, if you guys want to support the channel and myself, check out the official merch linked in the description down below. And if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you could also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.